This podcast is for educational purposes only, does not constitute legal advice, and does not create an attorney-client relationship. If you need legal assistance about a legal problem, contact an attorney.
Good afternoon and welcome to another exciting episode of Know Your Regulator, the podcast. Joining us today from the Texas Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners is Executive Director Brittany Sharkey and Staff Attorney Mark Lee. Thank you both so much for joining us today. We're very excited to have an opportunity to speak with you about your agency and share some insights with our viewers. How are you guys doing?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having us. We're so excited to talk about the very exciting world of veterinary regulation today.
Yeah, it's really great to have you all here. Like Simone said, we're excited to have a conversation. Before we kind of jump in, Mark and Brittany, would you mind telling us a little bit about your backgrounds and your roles over at the board?
Sure. Mark, do you mind if I go first?
Please do.
So I have been executive director over here at the Veterinary Board for just over 2 years. Prior to that, I'd served the agency as general counsel, and then before that, I worked in the legislature for a number of years. So have kind of coming at this from the view of actually creating the regulation and now enforcing the regulation. But prior to that, I was just your average attorney in private practice here in Austin. So it's been a very interesting and varied career.
I'm sure the perspectives have kind of changed from being in different roles. So that's really cool to hear, Brittany. As most of our viewers know, the Texas Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners is responsible for the regulation of veterinary professionals. But I'm sure that is not all that you guys do. Can you tell us a little bit more about your agency, how it functions, and some of the work that you guys do?
It's a great question. I think the most important thing to know about our agency is our mission is always to protect the public. I want our licensees especially to know that we're not in the business of gotcha regulation. One of my favorite facts is that we license over 13,000 individuals across the state. We get anywhere from around 500 to 600 complaints a year, meaning that 95% of our licensees are doing a great job and not interacting with us except to renew their licenses. So I love that we get to talk about what a wonderful community the veterinary profession is in Texas and the great work that they're doing for our people and pets. So that's really, we license our folks and then we also regulate. And that can involve either complaints that come in against our licensees or on-site inspections is something that we do as an agency that's very interesting and exciting. I don't know, for non-veterinary listeners, veterinarians are some of the only direct prescribers of and dispensers of prescriptions and controlled substances. And so the agency really kind of provides a first line of defense against diversion and sort of related issues there. And so that's kind of a very interesting and unique aspect of the agency.
I think always helpful for the public in general and license holders to know. Mark, I know you and I have known each other for years as friends and colleagues and even worked together on several occasions, but why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about your background and your role at the board?
Well, actually, this is my third career. I started off in the Navy. In fact, one of the reasons I did that was I couldn't afford to go to a very good school without some help from them and had originally intended to make that a career. But sailor's life was not for me. So I ended up taking advantage of my computer engineering degree to go into that field. And then when my last assignment for that was with Lockheed, and when they packed up and left town, I had to either move to Pennsylvania or Colorado, and neither of those seemed appealing. So I had a friend of mine convince me that law school would be a good idea, and here I am. I started off in private practice despite my evidence professor's admonition that I was minimally competent, and I started off with the state at the Texas Workforce Commission, being a hearing officer, then went over to the appraiser board, thanks to you, Troy, where I was a staff attorney. And then I ended up here at the veterinary board. And I have to tell you, we have a really good team now and a board that's really interested in making things better for everyone, including license holders. Although we protect the public, like Brittany was saying, we see 5% of the people. It's really the 95% of vets who are out there doing a good job. And part of the idea of being a regulator isn't just enforcement, it's setting standards so everyone knows what to expect and so that all those vets who are doing a good job aren't facing unfair competition from some of the vets out there who, aren't quite as diligent.
Couldn't agree more. I think that's very well put. And that kind of leads me to my next question, Brittany. I know agencies are always looking at the upcoming legislative session. Do you have any legislative initiatives or things that the agency is looking at? And maybe you could talk about how the public or the industry members can get involved in and be aware of and participate in those processes.
It's a little bit of it feels too soon to be talking about January already. I was like, I feel like we were just in legislative session. It can't be already, but we are gearing up for it again. I think, as an agency, our position has always been that we are here to enforce the regulation and not sort of create the regulation. And so we really just try and sort of stay on the sidelines as a resource to legislators when questions about the veterinary community come up. Some things we've kind of seen interestingly in the industry and across the country with some of our other state veterinary boards, we're seeing issues about like telemedicine are kind of cropping up and expanding access there. We're seeing direct access to sort of like alternative therapy providers, whether it be chiropractors or things like that, and also kind of a call for mid-level practitioners. While we don't necessarily have a specific, view on those, we're there to provide sort of insights and, any issues that might come up with regulation, because those are all very unique issues that are going to present new and sort of novel issues around regulation and, how we as a board are going to regulate any of those if those initiatives pass. So we're definitely keeping an eye on some of those issues. Interested to see where the legislature lands on that. As an agency, we actually had a really great legislative session last go around in terms of funding, and we're able to grow our staff by 33%, able to implement a new licensing database. So this session is actually this is a very easy session. I get to come in and say, we're not asking for nearly as much as we were last session. Thank you, legislators. But one of the things we're really excited about is building out our database system to include our compliance and enforcement modules. So we can really be making these data-driven decisions and sort of regulating from the 21st century space instead of Excel spreadsheets like we currently are. So really excited to talk to legislators about that. But I definitely just encourage folks to, kind of keep an eye. You can do some keyword searches in the Texas legislature online about veterinary medicine. So if you aren't so inclined to want to participate and sort of track some bills and see what's happening. I think legislators hearing from members of the public, members of the profession, really go a long way in helping inform some of those decisions and providing, that kind of front line, what's actually happening in clinics and in practices, or what our consumers are experiencing day in and day out. So definitely really encourage folks to make their voice heard if that's going to make their lives better or more challenging. Getting that industry perspective is invaluable for legislators to make those decisions. They've got I like to tell folks, we had 140 days to make these decisions. Anything you can do to help provide more context and more color is always going to go a long way.
That's definitely true. And I realize the agency's role is more to be as a resource. I imagine that compared to last session, it's going to be less busy. And that's kind of my next question. I know y'all went through Sunset last session and just wondered what your takeaway from that was. And maybe you could explain to the viewers the role that TDLR now has with the agency in the wake of kind of the sunset changes that were made.
Sure. So when I came aboard to the agency as executive director 2 years ago, the agency was in a bit of a free fall. We had lost, 60% of our executive level staff. We were in the middle of a sunset review that found a lot of glaring problems with the agency. And so we had a lot of work to do to help restore sort of public trust and accountability. And so Sunset actually devised a really interesting scheme where we're administratively attached to the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation for a period of 4 years. This is a first of its ever kind of program or statute that's ever been passed. And so they're kind of providing almost consulting and oversight services and audit services to us for this period of 4 years. And so this is a really unique way, instead of just kind of rolling our program into TDLR, kind of keeping us a separate entity, but also providing this kind of extra layer of oversight. We've just kind of completed our first year under this attachment, and it's been really interesting to get that kind of expertise and resources of a larger agency. Even now with the expansion of our staff, we're still only at 29 people. That's a a very small agency. TDLR has over 500. So it's always really funny to call them and be like, hi, I have a question about this. And it's like, oh, we have a specific person who does this. When, here at the agency, we're all wearing a lot of hats. Some are more flattering than others, is the joke I like to make. But getting to sort of talk to those like subject matter experts and leverage that expertise has been really helpful. And I think I give the legislature a lot of credit for thinking of it instead of, I think their answer for troubled agencies has been to absorb or, consolidate agencies. And so recognizing that this agency should still be independent and exist on its own, but kind of providing this extra layer of help has been really interesting and unique. And it's been a really great learning process for us. So that's kind of the role they're playing. And that's where we are.
Yeah, it sounds like a very innovative. I mean, I've never seen that mode, that approach to things. I think it's really innovative, and I think it also, like you said, it gives you a great resource to bounce some of these ideas off of a larger agency that may have seen and done things and have, a different perspective or different suggestions. So that's great.
And again, too, just I think, we understand coming from where we were that like we've got to do a lot of work to sort of restore that trust in the agency, and that was definitely lost in the previous administration. And so, having this kind of level of oversight and somebody sort of checking our work and saying, nope, they're good. Licensees are knowing that they're getting a fair shake. The public knows that their complaints are being handled appropriately. Anything we can do to help restore that public trust is really important to us as regulators. If we don't have that, we don't have anything. So.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely understand.
A point or two, Troy.
Oh, yeah.
Because our staff is limited, we're always trying to do more with what we've got or try to do things better, trying to be more efficient. And two of the programs that are coming out of the enforcement side that I've already talked to Brittany about is we're trying to implement a contingent dismissal program where a veterinarian who just has some issues and needs some help, everybody makes mistakes. And so if we had a tool where we could offer them the opportunity to make some improvements, recognize the deficiencies, but not result in a disciplinary action, that serves everybody interested. It saves us time and effort and energy. It keeps the veterinarian from having, a disciplinary action, which really may not be appropriate. And it also addresses the issue that they may need some help. Another one is we are currently having to go to the State Office of Administrative Hearings when we get complaints about people engaged in an unlicensed activity. And we're trying to change that. So again, we don't have to go to SOA. The due process that's given to somebody who's a licensee and has spent a lot of money and time and effort, getting this license is different than a person who's doing something that's illegal. And as long as they have an opportunity to, present their side of the story, then we believe that's a much more efficient way to address things. And we'd like to be able to do that in-house as opposed to taking it over to SOA.
I definitely remember at my old agency when we adopted contingent dismissals. I think that's a really great thing. It's a win-win for everybody, and it's a very innovative take on how to handle unlicensed activity. So be interested to see how those proceed.
And Troy, actually back to one of your earlier questions, kind of asking how folks can engage with us. Right now, we are actually taking public comment on potential legislative or statutory changes for the agency until about the middle of September. We have a report due to all the members of the Sunset Advisory Commission and other legislators at the start of December of this year, kind of in advance of legislative session. So if any listeners or viewers out there have any ideas on legislative changes they'd like to see or support for some of those proposals that Mark has made, we'd love to hear from the public and have that backup as we go into session.
Well, that's great. So I'm assuming they can go to the website and find that information, and you probably have like an email address where they can send in their comments.
Yes, it's actually on the TDLR website. So if you go to the TDLR website, there's a great little link on their homepage that has a specific email address to reach out to. So definitely look forward to any comments and suggestions.
Perfect. Yeah, because I think that's one of the biggest things I noticed as a former regulator is making sure people get involved, and when they know where they can go to have their voice heard. I think that's great that y'all are making those outreach efforts. So definitely, hopefully people see this podcast and maybe go and make some comments, because like you said, getting feedback from the community, from the industry is really what makes things go well when you're trying to go through session and figure out how to implement some of these things.
Absolutely.
And kind of speaking on, TDLR, in your relationship with them, are there any other instances in which your agency interacts with other agencies, and what are some scenarios in which that might occur?
I think probably the biggest instance is with the pharmacy board, with the prescription monitoring program. That's a really great resource for us to, especially as veterinarians are direct prescribers, to see if there's anything, to kind of do some of the pre-work before we go into a clinic, look at what's going on, see if there's anything untoward, because, there's a lot of controlled substances that have no use case in veterinary medicine that are only in human medicine. So if we see a troubling dispensing or prescribing pattern there, we kind of know something's rotten in the state of Denmark. And so that gives us, I think, that chance ahead of time to know when those issues are, kind of line that out and make sure that we're really getting to the heart of these, this very serious matter, and using our resources in a way that makes sense to make sure that we are getting those issues brought to light. So that's kind of I think our biggest, outside of TDLR, the pharmacy board is one of our biggest collaborators. And then also it's great. All of these kind of healthcare regulatory agencies are in the same building now. We just moved in about 2 years ago, right at the start of my tenure. And it's great to just be able to walk down to, the dental board or physical and occupational therapy and just kind of have these, discussions, say, hey, are you guys seeing this? Or we're dealing with this issue. What does this look like for you? And just being able to sort of bounce ideas off of other regulators and see what they're up against, see what they're contending with. And, if anyone's got great ideas. So building those relationships and across agencies has been, I think, really critical in a way that just wasn't done in previous administrations. So that's something that's been important to me, and has also just been really helpful to me.
Oh,
Yeah, I think that's really great. I mean, I remember when I was a regulator, it was all about the mortgage financial crisis back in 2008 and 10. And talking with the other regulatory partners was so instrumental and helpful, because they have other ideas, like you said, about how to tackle some of the same challenges that your agency is having. So that's great that y'all are centrally located and you can do that with in a much easier way.
Yes. It's great, especially as these smaller agencies, and, we're trying to sort of grapple with, hey, what are you doing for, your social media presence? Are you finding that worthwhile? Who's doing that? So just even from a management perspective, being able to sort of have those kind of resources and knowing that we're not out here navigating these waters alone has been really helpful. And I think it's been a really great experience to be in this building and working with our other agencies.
And I give a shout out to the nursing board, who I contacted at some point to discuss some of our enforcement ideas with, and they supplied me with some of their information about how they handle things, which, if you don't have to invent the wheel each time, then it's, again, more efficient and usually gets a better result. So they were very helpful.
A big thank you once again to our special guests, Brittany Sharkey and Mark Lee from the Texas Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners. For more information on Know Your Regulator, visit our website at www.bertolinolaw.com.
Know Your Regulator, the podcast that inspires you to engage.